Well, good morning. And it is definitely morning here in California. My name is Magda Peck, and I'm going to be the choreographer and host and collaborator for this morning's session. And I start by noting that in the stillness before dawn, in a place we call California, I woke on the ancestral lands of those who came first, in the confederated villages of the Ohlone, Muwekma, and Lisjan peoples, and waiting for the sun to rise on the banks of what's now called the San Francisco Bay. I listened again with humility and gratitude for the whisper of their stories, because stories have always been a vital part of our lives and our work from generation to generation. They surround us at the dinner table and in shul, over coffee, and everywhere in the community, because stories are who we are, who we've been, and who we shall become. They're alive. They are passed down in every family, in every town, on every corner. And as you heard from Abigail Echo Hawk's opening keynote about the stories passed from hands of her great aunt to her grandmother to her, and from Rhonda McGee's symposium yesterday about the power of listening with intention to the stories within us. Stories have been woven through this conference and are woven in our practice for maternal and child health. So on this final morning of the conference for 2021, we're going to shift from telling stories to telling strategic storytelling on purpose to add strength and intention to our work. And in doing so, we're going to have the assistance, if we can come into the gallery mode, of some folks who've worked together, some just recently, and some for the first time today have seen each other. And we encourage our faculty that are here to introduce themselves briefly. They're going to tell you who they are, and they're going to tell you a 6-word story about why stories matter for the work that we do. And let me start with Kenn Harris. Hey, good morning, Kenn. How are you?
Good early morning to you, Magda, and everyone out there. My name is Kenn Harris, and I am the Executive Project Director and Engagement Lead at the National Institutes for Children's Health Quality, better known as NICHQ, and there I head up the Federal Healthy Start TA and Support Center. And I would like to honor and acknowledge Pawtucket, Massachusetts, Pequot, and Mohegan tribal lands in which I live and work on. My 6-word story this morning, Magda: storytelling for purpose, purposed for impact. Good morning.
Thank you for that, Kenn. We're waiting on Janelle Palacios to join us. Not sure she's been able technically to get in. They're just in time. Janelle, good morning. A quick introduction then, please. And you're on mute, so you want to take yourself off so we hear every word.
Thank you. You think that with all of these Zoom meetings, we'd all be professionals right now, but some of us are still cats. My name is Janelle Palacios. I'm happy to be here. I am a nurse midwife and a researcher and a consultant. I live in the Bay Area in Northern California, very close to Magda. And I have a lot of experience working with Native populations. I myself am Salish and Kootenai from the Flathead Indian Reservation in Montana. And I would say that my 6-word short story is that I'm happy to be here today.
And your tribal affiliation, of which you are so proud.
Yep, Salish and Kootenai.
Thank you. Welcome, Janelle. Alethia.
Good morning. I'm Alethia Carr. I'm the Health Equity Lead for the Southeast Michigan Perinatal Quality Improvement Coalition in Detroit, Michigan. And I'm really pleased to be here this morning. I've been thinking about the 6-word story. Maybe I can run a few words together, but my grandmother was a midwife in Georgia. in the 60s.
And Kristina.
Thank you, Magda, and good morning, everyone. My name is Kristina Wint, and I'm the Program Manager for Women's Health at the Association of Maternal and Child Health Programs, or AMCHIP. Also very happy to be here with you all today. I am coming to you humbly and with respect to the Piscataway and Nakachunk or Anacostan peoples on where I also live and work, that being the greater DC metropolitan area. And when I think about my 6-word story, what compels me to this work, I think about my own birth story and how it was shared to me with my parents. And so my 6 words are: the incubator made up the difference.
Thank you for that. Rosemary?
Good morning, everyone. I'm Rosemary Fournier. I work with the National Center for Fatality Review and Prevention. My work is in the FEMUR, Fetal and Infant Mortality Review area. I come and join you today from Michigan, the ancestral lands of the Potawatomi. And my 6-word story is listen deeply, change hearts and minds.
Wanda Barfield, welcome to this space.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Wanda Barfield, and I'm the director of CDC's Division of Reproductive Health. And I would just simply like to acknowledge and honor the Creek and Cherokee nations and their peoples on whose ancestral homelands I'm speaking from today in Atlanta, Georgia. And my 6-word story is: stories matter to maintain our humanity.
So Wanda, thanks for being my co-host today. Any words of welcome you want to offer before we kick this thing off?
I am just so thrilled to be your co-host, Magda, and also to hear the stories of these wonderful speakers. And I hope that the audience will just have an opportunity to participate by putting your stories in the chat. And also, as we speak, whatever questions may come up, please share them in the chat as well. Looking forward to a wonderful meeting.
Thank you. Well, I'm watching the sun rise above me. And with that, if I could rise up the slides that she's going to put forth, which I'm incredibly grateful for. And what I will encourage is that we take a moment to ask the question, as Rosemary advances our slides, what are the basics we need to know about storytelling? This is a workshop that we're going to try to make sure you understand the power and purpose of merging the data and the story. So with some basic parameters and just a taste, you're going to get so filled up for breakfast this morning, I assure you, or lunch, wherever you may be. But this is for you to strengthen practice and influence decision makers in a new way by storytelling that is strategic. Next, please. So in the 6 words you've already heard from our colleagues here, I'm going to ask them again if they would put it in the chat. You will have an opportunity to hear from each of them. And what I've challenged them is that each of them gets about 9 minutes to be able to tell you their sweetest stuff about strategic storytelling from different perspectives. So you had a chance to meet our presenters. And next, if we can look then at 4 things that I'd like you to know, and it's going to be 4 things in 4 minutes. So let's see if I can put it on the East Coast thing. Here we go. First thing you should know. There is a science to story. Next, please. And in that science, we need to understand what stories do to the human brain, about it emoting a physical an emotional response, that there are predictions and processings that have been seen on brain scans and synchronized brain waves. It is transformative, it is healing. And so we need to recognize, not only is it our legacy from generations, but it also is something we can appreciate how it affects our brains when we're being strategic in telling that story. Next. In fact, story is what we're hardwired to do. It's how we make sense of stuff. And Antonio Damasio, in his Neuroscience of Story, talks about the stickiness of stories, and that it allows us it helps us make sure that we connect the dots, that what we learn becomes part of how we are. Next, please. I want to acknowledge that in our work, dominant narratives prevail. Particularly if there is an opportunity for us to take a story that's stuck in our heads. That's what dominant narratives are. They are stuck stories. And we're going to hear today some stories from folks that have an opportunity to tell you about how they have changed with the power of their story and have changed the dominant narrative. And this would be a great time for me to recognize that I did not call upon Tamala Milan Alexander, one of our fabulous storytellers, who you'll be hearing from it at the end of the day, and trying to cram so many people in. So at this point, if you could go back a slide for a second, just keep it right there. And Tamala, if you could come on and introduce yourself, and if we can spotlight you, we can, or take us down off of the video for the slides for a second. We want to bring you back into this space. My humble apologies, my dear. And if you would, because that was just, I didn't have to count to 8. So give me a welcome, please, and a shout out, and then we'll come back to our slides.
Thank you so much. My name is Tamala Milan Alexander. I come to you from Chicago, Illinois. I was formerly Westside Healthy Star participant and employee. I have now transitioned to work as a community engagement director for Ever Thrive of Illinois, which is a policy force working for moms and babies and families across the state of Illinois. And I didn't have a story, but I had 6 words that mean so much to me and in my journey. And those are unsure, moment, connected, committed, empathy, and purpose. Ooh. And welcome and salutations. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That's just the perfect pause that we needed. Sometimes the best mistakes give us an opportunity to take a fresh breath. Thank you for your graciousness and my mistake. Thank you.
Thank you.
And this is the thing that Tamala has been my teacher about how we're going to change dominant narratives about that mother and all the things that we attribute to her and why her baby died, and how if we change that narrative, then we have the possibility for changing lives. And Kendall Haven has reminded us that if you have prior knowledge saved in memory, the only thing in our brains that will make that change is if you give a replacement story, a different story that is more powerful, more influential, or more effective than the original. There are folks who like the dominant narrative. There are folks who want the stuck stories to prevail. Our job is to give them replacement stories that knock their socks off and change the way we think and are about the business of women, children, families, and fathers. Next, please. You know that the second thing I want to tell you is that every story, to be effective, has to have its essential ingredients, 3 basic parts. Something happens, something changes, or a choice is made, and then there's a resolution. You know, once upon a time, and every day, then one day, and then, and so, and now. You've seen this arc. We watched Disney. We grew up with this story. If we know the basic parts, ingredients, we can tell a story that is whole. Next. But we have to know what we want the story to do, and it has to do 4 things. We need to feel connected the moment the story begins. We need to bring people in, and then we need to give them the context of why are they in this place? And then we have to give them a choice or a change that they can actually see clearly that something is greatly at stake and about to change. And we have to button it at the end. And if your story that you tell doesn't make folks feel connected, does not give them the larger context, does not make it clear what is at stake to change and has no end but just goes on, you will lose them every time. Next. Third thing, Marshall Ganz at Harvard talks about the power of story, that the story is supposed to communicate the fear, the hope, and the anxiety. We're supposed to feel it and get the moral of it, not just the concept. A story is the teaching of our hearts. Empathy has to be part of every story. And so often when we tell our data, we strip it of empathy. We strip it of its humanity so that it is objective. In this age and stage of our practice in epidemiology and in maternal and child health, it's time to remarry humanity and information with empathy. Next. Great quote. I'll learn what people will forget what you said and forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel, said the great Maya Angelou. So we need to tell stories that stick. Emotion has to be part of it, courageously, for them to last. And last, we have to begin with the anchor stories of why, absolutely why, because if we know the why of why we tell our stories, of why we do this work, of that grandmother who was a midwife, the auntie to my grandmother, whose hands I touched, we'll never forget that story. And we must learn to listen deeply to the stories that want to be told, that we are not letting surface and rise in the dawn of each day. We call them anchor stories. And as all of us that work in this space, we need to have our own anchor stories first. So that's our invitation to you right now, our invitation for you to give us a chance to hear what your anchor story might be, because everybody has a story. Everybody is a story, and of the 107 people, I want you to know yours, your superpower. It is your most sacred currency. It gives you a reason to get up and greet the dawn each day. So here's a question for you to take just 2 minutes. Can you remember, colleagues on this call, can you remember a moment when you felt fully committed to what you do, or when you felt heard, or when you felt invisible? We're going to give you literally 2 minutes, and I'll ask you to post your reflection, your story, your moment in the chat now. This would be a great time for you to consider this question about a moment. Because as you're writing in the chat, I think one from Janelle, but there's 111 people here that I was hoping for some beautiful stories that might come in. Let's see if you have the place and the space. Thank you, Kenn, for your invisible story. Thank you, Rebecca. It's a moment. We try sometimes to tell the whole story, when stories that are the ones that stick are like scoops of ice cream, not the whole tub of rocky road, even though it's been a rocky road. Moments are the pearls of story. My grandmother's pearls. Each one that I touch tells me a story of her. This will be something that you had an opportunity to do throughout our time together. But what I'd like to do now, as you think about needing to practice your story, invited to practice your story, to know about a moment, we'll come back to those and look in the chat. Thank you, Kimberly, for that powerful moment. Read them, honor them. Keep your stories coming. And as we turn now from your contributions as storytellers, look what you did. Everybody is a story here. Everybody has a moment, if you dare to share it. We're going to hear from 6 remarkable people. We're going to hear from folks who have been in different parts of our MCH spectrum, our MCH world, an opportunity to hear what they are learning and doing. We're building this era of storytelling for social change together. We are storifying our space, our work, our practice for greater impact. So we're going to hear first from a pair that are going to look at practice for better health outcomes through the practice perspective from Janelle and Alethia. We're going to hear from Rosemary and Kristina about data and action. And then from Wanda and Kenn about influencing decision makers. And with that, let's hear their approaches. Janelle, start us off, and when you're done, pass it on to Alethia.
Perfect, my pleasure. Good morning, everyone. It's my pleasure to share with you a practical use of storytelling that was done in a clinical setting to help others really see health inequity in action over a few lifetimes. Next slide, please. So first, I want to acknowledge the Coast Miwok, Wapo, and Pomo land that I'm standing on in Northern California. And by giving land acknowledgements, we recognize those that have been displaced by local, state, and federal policies, but also recognize those who remain and their light with their rights to these lands. As Dr. Peck shared with you, I'm Salish and Kootenai, and I myself shared that. I grew up in my community on the Flathead Indian Reservation in Northern Montana. And as a midwife, I currently teach OBGYN residents how to center their practice from the heart of a midwife. And this is not always easy. Next slide, please. As 2019 was a year of constant giving, health equity and structural racism were 2 more gifts our nation were meant to learn and improve upon. I could see from various meetings I had attended and in daily practice, these 2 intricately entwined concepts were difficult for a number of clinicians to grasp beyond their clinical doorstep of seeing patients as isolated individuals and not woven in their community and historical fabrics. Next slide, please. And this is not surprising, as this late 1800s painting entitled The Agnew Clinic illustrates lecture-style grand rounds instruction from the operating theater. And in many places today, a surgical room is referred to as the operating theater still. Next slide, please. This is what grand rounds typically looks like pre-COVID. And the next slide. And then this is what they look like today. Next slide, please. We see the lecturer, we see the students, and we may hear from those experts who personally encountered the patient, but we never hear from the patient. The patient is an object, a body to be healed at best, or to be discussed in context of losing to their vicious disease at worst, but always learning gained from those around. Please, next slide. Exactly, Jennifer. To help my colleagues understand long-rooted health inequity tied to historical events that have lasting effects today, I developed a very personal presentation. I shared with them a story, in story fashion, 3 generations of women's experiences of perinatal outcomes, such as fetal demises, preterm deliveries, miscarriages, abusive encounters with Indian health service providers, all the while situated in their wider historical constructs of American Indian history and their present everyday lived experience of racism, violence, substance use, and mental health issues. This presentation I developed was actually from work I had done over 20 years ago when I was a new college student, and it was trying to help people understand teen pregnancy as a frequent occurrence among Indigenous women, but also how teen pregnancy was transformative for early childbearing young families. Next slide, please. The version I gave to my hospital colleagues is based on my original presentation from 20 years ago. And today this presentation has greatly transformed, where in one version, I give a 10-minute primer on American Indian history via memes. So today I'll share a few slides from an assortment of these presentations. Next slide, please. I start by sharing how this presentation is really storytelling, that my intent is to share a story that is not often told nor spoken about. What I will share will be uncomfortable, and their discomfort is beneficial because it helps them reassess what they know, have been told, and what more they want to uncover. For certain, my hope is that through discomfort, we can grow as a practice, as an organization, as a community, and on a grander scale, we grow as a nation. I comment that our education system is reflective of the victor's tale, and it will take stepping outside to challenge and learn more. Next slide, please. I share that through warfare, starvation, and disease, our Indigenous population was gravely impacted, with some experts postulating about 10% of the global population was lost over a few hundred years, as Indigenous people throughout the Americas were decimated. And for comparison, during World War II, 80 million lives were lost, accounting for 3% of the global population loss. I share how, as Western expansion continued, those American Indian tribes that signed treaties and forfeited their ancestral traditional lands were relegated onto smaller plots of land called reservations, where for the first decades they were not allowed to leave and were shot on sight for leaving without permission. Next slide, please. After forcing Indigenous people onto reservations, all tribes saw their children from as young as age 4 until they were 18 or 19 years of age, forced to attend Indian boarding schools. And early in this development, children were taken far away, purposely splitting kids from the same family and tribe to deter running away and isolating them. Children were terrorized in efforts to assimilate future generations of Native people into the dominant culture. Next slide, please. As I pivoted to a contemporary issue Indigenous people face, I talk about recent impact of COVID-19 on our communities, the uncovering of mass unmarked children's graves on Indian residential boarding school lands, how Native women and children are targeted with violence and rape, and the missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls crisis many tribal nations have been facing, as well as comment on the activities to protect water, in addition to the health and well-being of communities and families. Giving an overview of my family's perinatal outcomes in connection to their inherited history and ongoing daily lived experiences of continued marginalization from these historical policies and events has helped my colleagues better understand health context. Next slide, please. I could have given a typical Grand Rounds lecture style to share my family's perinatal outcomes, but as told through story, sharing Native American history, I was able to engage my audience. I painted images in their minds, and they can never unsee those. I helped evoke emotional and physical responses. The stories I shared have the potential for transforming my colleagues' experiences to go beyond seeing the clinical picture and situate patients, humans, in their historical and contemporary lived space. Next slide, please. Thank you. It has been my pleasure to share these few minutes with you to give you a little taste of some of the work that I have done, in addition to all the work that Dr. Peck and Rosemary Fournier have also done. And everyone on this panel are amazing people. I've gotten to meet a few, but I've also worked with a number of them before. And so I'm very happy to be here in this lineup. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Janelle. Let's take just a minute because you're absolutely right. Seeing the images, you can't forget what you've already seen. And I think we all need to just take a minute to reflect on that excellent, excellent introduction that you provided. Thank you for inviting me to speak about the storytelling component of Project Detroit Voices for Life in Michigan. As I said, I'm the Health Equity Lead Consultant at Southeast Michigan Perinatal Quality Improvement Coalition in Michigan. Next slide. And I believe all people are entitled to optimal health. Project Detroit Voices for Life is an initiative funded by the Merck Safer Childbirth Cities investment. It's part of their $500 million global initiative launched in 2018 to help create a world where no woman has to die while giving life. Our work was funded as part of the second cohort this February for a 3-year grant to improve maternal health in Detroit based on locally identified needs. We're working to promote evidence-informed interventions in this effort, recognizing that we may have to infuse innovation in our work in order to identify changes needed in our system of perinatal care. Our grant was awarded to SimQuick, the agency I'm with, which assembled 4 community partners. And just to give you a little background, SimQuick is one of 9 perinatal quality improvement collaboratives in Michigan that's supported by the State Health Department, MCH area, to improve health equity in the perinatal health system. Next slide, please. Actually, the city of Detroit approached SimQuick to apply for the Merck funding, recognizing our neutral position in the community and the expansive level of engagement we've achieved with regional perinatal stakeholders. All the partner agencies supported the role of SimQuick as the convener of this work and helped to develop the funded application. The Detroit Health Department is one of our main partners, and they're working to establish a maternal mortality and vitality review team and recruit and help train storytellers. Our other partner is the Black Mothers Breastfeeding Association, which is recruiting, training, and facilitating employment of community-based doulas, as well as identifying women interested in being storytellers. VAMFA convened a doula summit as part of the work to address many of the issues surrounding incorporating community-based doulas into the continuum of care. Henry Ford Health System is our third partner, which is working to address implicit bias within its health system and identifying another health system to do the same by adopting the training curriculum that they're developing. And then finally, Focus Hope, a longstanding community-based organization in Detroit, is collaborating with us on storytellers and identifying men to discuss approaches to better engage them in the perinatal system of care. Focus Hope has been around more than 50 years and is well known by the community. It's working really closely with men and fathers to help them understand the role they can play in improving maternal health outcomes. And many of the men that they've been working with have also expressed interest in learning to become storytellers and are being added to our effort. The recruitment of storytellers has been accomplished through the direct programming provided by Focus Hope in the areas of early childhood and nutrition program. Next slide, please. To focus on the storytelling aspect of Project Detroit Voices for Life, I'll share that our goal is to foster systems change to the damaging power dynamics that have prevented Black families from forming trusting relationships with Detroit institutions. Our project builds on collective impact approach, working through existing organizations in Detroit, and all of our partners have been operating in the city over time. They were not new organizations. And that's really why our project, I think, was funded, while being led and informed by Black families in Detroit to create tools, gain knowledge and resources that encourage self-confidence in community to advocate for respectful perinatal care. Our model is based on the Water Systems of Change by FSG, by working to examine the water of our perinatal system to better understand the systemic forces at play. We pulled together some of the players in this pool, the 4 partners I mentioned, to identify voices of women and men that will offer the real life reflection of the impact of services, practices, and practices that people experience within the perinatal system of care. It's our intention to better understand those aspects that support maternal health in order to reshape the system into one of vitality, demonstrated by elimination of maternal mortality and severe morbidity. The storytelling aspect of this work provides the narratives needed to expand mental models about Black and Brown birthing people in Detroit. As Magda, as Dr. Peck mentioned, we need to change those dominant mental models that exist. Our work is designed to make systems change to engage Black mothers and fathers as context experts in co-designing interventions, programs, policies, and informational and empowerment campaigns that promote maternal vitality. Our partners will identify 100 women to share stories of maternal vitality for a multimedia campaign from existing community outreach programs. Through this work across agencies, closer partnerships have already begun to develop in service delivery. The work will also create capacity within the Detroit community in terms of skill development in storytelling and advocacy with confidence. Encouraging more direct and authentic conversations with perinatal health providers is another aspect that we expect to happen, as well as creating tools and resources that communicate the experience of Black women in the perinatal care system and the potential gaps in supportive, respective quality care. Synergy across work that advances health equity is anticipated. Through the engagement of 100 Black mothers to develop an empowerment campaign, a voice expressing the perinatal health care needs of Detroit women and men will be heard. Next slide, please. 10 months into our project, and we've hired a project manager to oversee the work, who is Karen Schrock. Our partner agencies have begun to identify women willing to be coached for storytelling. We do offer a stipend to women for going through the training. As I said, men have also indicated an interest in going through the storytelling training, and we're working to make that happen. We've identified Satori Shakur as our storytelling instructor to work with this effort. Ms. Shakur is a storyteller, a writer, a social entrepreneur, and hosts a weekly show of her business, Secret Society of Twisted Storytellers, where she curates 4 storytellers at the Charles Wright Museum of African American History that is televised. And this was actually pre-COVID. Now it's all virtual, of course. She uses an equity lens with her work and is internationally known. The Secret Society of Twisted Storytellers was started in 2012. In terms of training, we've offered the training to leaders in the partner agencies, including SimQuick, to share the approach and impact of her work so they'd have firsthand knowledge of the training approach and the content, and to help the partner agencies know how to describe the training to prospective women. Training is 2 hours of instruction, with Ms. Shakur offering easy to remember guidance about storytelling, and then 2 hours of storytelling practice by the participants following the instruction. We started our training in September and have had a training session each month since, and this first year we anticipate completing 4. The goal is for each partner agency to identify 33 people for training during the time of the project. All the sessions are recorded and a copy of the recording is given to each participant. Participants also sign a release for use of the video. Next slide. I included this slide, and Rosemary, this is where you're gonna break. I wanted you to get a sense of the, I'll let her go ahead. Just
Tori Shakur, and I do a lot of things. I am an artist, I'm a veteran of live performance, and I am a social entrepreneur. I was born in the sweet spot of history, where everybody had the same values from the President of the United States on down to your city government, which was education was a priority. Music and arts in the classrooms, and I started learning how to play the violin, and I was playing it for orchestra, all city orchestra, Cass Tech orchestra, electrifying strings. So when I graduated from Cass Tech, I was already a professional violinist. I was playing with Earl Clue, a group called Electrifying Strings, and playing at United Sound, playing string parts on the records coming out of Motown, coming out of Detroit. So it was just music was just part of society, twisted storytellers. Anybody can suggest a theme, and we curate 4 storytellers around that theme. It was an idea for a social experiment to teach people how to tell their stories, because it is a craft at the highest level. It's an art form. It's not just talking. If you're alive, you're breathing, you have a story, either it's the one you don't want to tell, which is that's the one I want to hear, or you just haven't discovered that story. It's a human being is the common denominator, not whether you're a white one or a black one or a girl or a boy or transgender or whatever. At the end of the day, you're a human being. You bleed, you lose, you win, and that experience is easily conveyed to those who are listening, because there are a lot of storytelling is just available.
I did want to give you just a taste of our instructor, because she brings a level of richness to the support that's given to the women involved. Fast forward to the end of our project, we expect to have videos, data, infographics, hashtags, photos, sample social media posts, and created from first-person narrative content. We anticipate that women who've received the storytelling training will have increased self-confidence and determination to advocate for respectful care. As I wrap up, I have 4 slides, 4 clips of some of the women that have been part of the storytelling training, and I wanted you to get a sense of their experience, why they were willing to volunteer to be part of the storytelling, and I'll let them speak for themselves. Okay, you can start.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, Jazz.
Yes, how are you?
Good, and yourself?
Good. So I'm actually kind of acquainted with you already. I used to work at Textures by Nefertiti.
Yes.
For 11 years.
Ah.
So I haven't been there since February, since I had this little one here.
Is she 6 months too?
She's 7 months.
7 months.
Just 7 months. So.
And what's her name?
Her name is Glory.
Hi, Glory.
Yep, this is Glory.
I love that name.
Thank you. So yeah, right now I am a full-time mother to her, and I have an 8-year-old by the name of Anjola as well. So she's at school right now. So that's what I do. Work on myself, building myself, entrepreneurial things that I've always wanted to do. I'm getting into. I did recently get into writing during this time that I've been off. So I'm excited for this class. And I've been acquainted with the classes. I didn't know you did class. I've been acquainted with the storytelling. So I'm excited to learn how that goes so I could tell my story.
Okay, great.
Next slide.
Yes, I'm sorry. Hi, I'm actually in the car. That's why I had my camera off, because I was driving. Now I'm sitting. But my name is Ashley. I was a sister friend, or I found out about it actually when I was pregnant with this little one right here that does not want to stay still.
What's her name?
Her name is Alethia.
Hi, Alethia.
Right here, his name is Gabriel.
Hi, Gabriel.
Hi. So I have just the 2, and I pretty much just wanted to gain a little bit of what both the people said, like as far as getting to know more people, and then also hearing different stories, especially because I did breastfeed with my son, but only a little bit. And my daughter, I only said I was gonna breastfeed for 3 months, but I ended up breastfeeding for 9 months. So just to see how other people's stories went, because it seemed easy, but it wasn't as easy as it was supposed to be. So that's why I only went to 9 months instead of the whole year. So
Next slide.
My name is Asia Burnett. My background is in corporate training, and I was hoping that this workshop would help me to improve my vocal presence and impact. This is Mason. I'm in his playroom, so I've invaded his space, and he is having none of it. I have a passion for birth and breastfeeding and the childbearing year. So, I'm hoping to incorporate all of those things to become a better speaker.
Next slide. And this last clip talks about what she's learned.
Well, let's get started with a little review. So Malika, can you take yourself off mute? We're going to work with the 3 top tips. So can you review that with everybody? What are the 3 top tips?
Hopefully I remember correctly. Simple, keep it simple. Start in the action. Start off with something you were doing, something that catches attention, and simple action and stakes. Have some stakes in the story.
Absolutely. Okay.
Okay, so I'll end here. I thought it was important for you to see and hear from the actual women that have been involved. Actual stories are not being shared at this time because we still have work to be done. I'll pass it over to Rosemary. Thank you again for having me.
Thank you so much, Alethia. I am so excited being a fellow Michigander that I will get to follow closely the stories and the success of Birth Detroit. So I appreciate so much your being here with us today on the panel. So we are shifting a little bit now. I am Rosemary Fournier. I work with the National Center for Fatality Review and Prevention. We're funded by HRSA to support both child death review and FEMUR programs. So we're transitioning now to talk about how stories transform the data into action. And you're going to hear some early lessons from me around the FEMUR program, and then from Kristina on maternal mortality review. And I already mentioned that I'm joining you today from the ancestral lands of the Potawatomi, the Peoria, and the Mississauga. And I'll just mention a bit of brief history on FEMUR. This is a program that has been around for many, many years, getting close to 30. The beginnings of FEMUR were back in the mid-1980s when huge concern over the high infant mortality rates intensified around the nation. And so initially 10 pilot sites were funded. And then a lot of growth in the 1990s. ACOG was funded to be the Technical Assistance and Resource Center. And then state projects were added, and a national evaluation was actually done in 2004 by Johns Hopkins. So today there are over 150 FEMUR programs in 27 states, also 2 US territories of Puerto Rico and the Commonwealth of the Northern Mariana Islands. All of these states are reviewing fetal and infant deaths. Some states have multiple programs like California and Florida. Others have a single program. But what's important is that all of these are local. They're locally owned, community-oriented, action-oriented programs. So we like to say that when vital statistics alone cannot tell you the full story, communities turn to FEMUR to tell us how and why babies are dying. FEMUR collects information from multiple sources of data. Sometimes our case review team members are the only persons that see all of the pieces put together, all of the pieces of the puzzle come together. Several times throughout today's panel, you're going to hear how important the qualitative data is. You've heard it from Alethia. You've heard it from Janelle. You will hear it from me and Kristina and Kenn and Wanda, how important the voices of the families are who have experienced the loss of an infant. And so FEMUR, for every case we review, we attempt to get that interview from our families, from our mothers, fathers, and caregivers. So we also like to say that FEMUR is ultimately complete continuous quality improvement. It is the ultimate CQI. We start with that intense data gathering that I mentioned. We're collecting information from medical records, prenatal care, home visits, WIC, and other social services. FEMR is a two-tiered process. We have a case review team. It's a multidisciplinary team that reviews those individual cases to learn what could be done better, what barriers to care might there exist in a community, and how can we improve our systems of care. The second team is that community action team. They're the folks that receive the recommendations based on the case review, and then they're charged with developing and implementing action plans. And ultimately, changes in not only the physical health, but the social environment for childbearing families is the ultimate outcome. So we have CQI, the continuous quality improvement. Now, I just want to share briefly what we hear from sites, those 150 FEMR programs around the country, as to how FEMR benefits them. How does it benefit communities? Well, first is that FEMR is focused on systems. It is not about blaming individuals or providers or the agencies. It is about systems issues. FEMR is action-oriented. It's not just reviewing cases, but reviewing cases for the goal of improving systems of care. FEMR includes broad community participation and, of course, that qualitative data. The stories, the family's perspective, getting those interviews has been a long-standing part of our FEMR data collection practice, but we've engaged in strategic storytelling now to refresh and strengthen what the current FEMR interviews approach is. So we want to learn how to better welcome, hear, and elevate those lived experiences of the mothers, fathers, and families in new ways and for much greater impact. So to that end, we joined forces with Dr. Magda Peck. This started as a little sidebar conversation 2 years ago at the City Match Conference, which was held in Providence, Rhode Island. And we were chatting and talking about FEMR and stories, and we said, wouldn't it be cool to start a program or a project that would really better equip our FEMR sites to get the stories and then to strategically tell them for social change. So of course we planned an in-person one-day workshop. We were going to have this in person before COVID hit. And of course we had to pivot and shift into a virtual platform. So in the fall of 2020, we launched a pilot project that really engaged 5 sites that were chosen to participate, hosted 4 90-minute sessions during that time period. And those were about a month apart. We ran from September to December.
Yeah, we have to do all of this.
Okay. Hopefully we can have everyone mute themselves because we're hearing a bit of background noise. Thank you so much. And during those 4 virtual sessions, we really focused on the basics, the art and science of storytelling, some of the specific stories around loss and for health and healing, and then how to use storytelling for social change. We had a wonderful panel. Many of those folks are presenters on today's session. And then finally, our 4th session focused on making a difference, storytelling in FEMR to truly make a difference. We're now in phase 2 of the project. I'm so excited. In November of this year, we launched a second initiative. And this time we've engaged 6 teams who had to apply for a position in the project. And we're really focusing on how to enhance their capacity to invite and incorporate strategic storytelling into their FEMR efforts. So 2 teams are joining from Tennessee, a team from Ohio, Michigan, Delaware, and Broward County, Florida. We shifted a little bit. We're doing 2 half-day-long intensive sessions, again, with a variety of faculty, many of whom are on this call: Kristina Wint, Janelle, Palacios, Kenn Harris, and of course, Magda Peck is the lead consultant for this project. And then we're also weaving in some individual coaching sessions. So those half-day intensive sessions and one-on-one coaching in between. And we're very excited about the launch of this project. I did want to share one quick story. This is a story from Washoe County, which is Reno, Nevada. They were one of the participants in our first cohort or our pilot project with storytelling. And what they did with their interviews, they heard their stories from their families over and over again about how delayed or interrupted prenatal care during COVID was really seriously placing their mothers at risk for preterm births, for low birth weight babies, and other poor pregnancy outcomes. So it was those stories from the moms that identified the reasons they were not seeking healthcare were the lockdowns, or simply a lack of understanding about the guidelines or resources and actual fear of contracting the virus. So to disrupt that or to improve their systems of care in Nevada, the Nevada Division of Health and Human Services launched a big campaign to promote better access to information for both providers and patients so that they would prevent those delays in care or lack of prenatal care due to concerns about COVID. They launched a large public service announcement that encouraged women to continue to seek early and often prenatal care during the pandemic. So just a quick story on how a community used their findings, used the stories from their families to improve their agency systems of care. And then I'll just close here with a word cloud. We had an all-female team meetup back in October where we gathered over 120 participants for a half-day virtual meeting, and we storified that meeting. Again, Dr. Peck, Janelle Palacios, Kenn Harris were some of our presenters. And at the end of the storytelling session, we asked participants to share a quick 6-word story like we did at the opening of today's presentation. So what you're seeing here is just that word cloud, and I think it's so powerful. Things like data doesn't tell the story. Why should my skin color protect me? Or why should my skin color not tell my story? So I wanted to share that, and I will now turn this over to Kristina Wint, who's going to talk about maternal mortality review and the ways stories helped them in their mom meeting. Kristina.
Thank you so much, Rosemary. I am so appreciative of you and your work and the work of Dr. Peck as the Female Storytelling Project really contributed and help us think about what storytelling and storification looks like in maternal mortality review committees. So thank you so much for that and the introduction. I want to quickly share again, my name is Kristina Wint. I'm the program manager for women's health at AMCHIP. If you're unfamiliar with who AMCHIP is, we are an organization that leads and supports programs nationally to protect and promote the optimal health of women, children, youth families, and their communities. And in that work, we're able to collaborate and engage with a variety of different partners. And I'm so thankful for our engagement with Rosemary and team, and also with our engagement with the CDC, for which we're able to work on this project around maternal mortality review committees. I also want to take a moment to kind of share what anchors me and roots me in this work. And I shared my 6-word story earlier about the incubator making up the difference. And that is because what really compels me and propels me into this work is my own birth story. I was a premature infant when I was born. I was 4 pounds, 10 ounces. My mom was preeclamptic when she had me. That's why I had to be born so early. And at a conference just like this, I was in a presentation where, the presenter shared, what is your birth story? Ask your parents, ask your family what it is. And I had off and on heard the story over the years, but that really prompted me to learn more about like what happened and what went on. And my parents shared with me, my dad shared with me, the doctors talking to him about what was going to happen and him having to make some decisions about, they have pictures, I wish I could have one with me today, but of me in that incubator. And when I think about this work, when I think about the stories, I think about my parents' story, I think about my story. And so I'm really appreciative, not only to do this work, but to be here with you all. Next slide, please, Rosemary. And so in this work, I just want to share very quickly a quote from an amazing member of the Colorado Maternal Mortality Review Committee about MMRCs and about this work, because again, I think it really grounds us into the importance of maternal mortality review and a bit of what it is. And her name is Shivani Bhatia, and she shared the ethic of the review is one that's respectful and an opportunity for self-reflection as a community on the society. There are so many people that have been affected and are experiencing trauma from that death. To me, it's an important practice of self-reflection and of grief. It is an opportunity for us to grieve who have died, to grieve that these are outcomes and inequities that are happening in our society, and to allow that to be the fire to do better and ensure survival is not the floor. and that there's so much more that we can do. And what points out to me and what I want to hone in on in Shivani's quote is that in this work, it's very easy for us to say that we are just working for survival. We just want, people who are giving birth, women to survive the birth process. But I want to do more than that. I want to see women, families, people who are birthed to thrive, to have beautiful, robust, and well-rounded lives. And that is the story. We want to hear those stories, those robust stories. And that is the significance of this work. Next slide. And so to give some just brief understanding of maternal mortality review, or MMRCs, as I may refer to them, this is a process to identify every death that took place during pregnancy, childbirth, and the year postpartum, and to capture information and data that is not typically available from other data sources. MMRCs are typically operating at a state level, and almost every state in the United States actually has an MMRC, as well as there's some jurisdictional MMRCs, New York City, Washington, DC. Again, AMCHIP is incredibly happy to be a partner of the CDC on the Enhancing Review and Surveillance to Eliminate Maternal Mortality Initiative, or ERASE-MM, which is the work to support maternal mortality review committees in their work. And if you'd like to learn more, you can go to reviewtoaction.org. Next slide. And so, and this is like a really rough overarching timeline of maternal mortality review. There is so much more to this, but I just wanted to give like a quick and dirty review. And so maternal mortality review is not a new process or a new tool that is used to understand maternal deaths. The first maternal mortality reviews actually started in the early 1900s. And over the next half century or so, they continue to rise and flourish to really think through and address the high rate of maternal mortality that existed in our country. However, around the 1980s, these maternal mortality review committees started to disband for a variety of reasons. Some will say the decrease in maternal deaths, some will say some fear of litigation that came from the process, many things, but they did start to disband. However, I'm sure all of us in this space know that maternal mortality is on an unfortunate rise in this country. And not only is it rising, but there's an incredible disparity in racial groups where Black and Indigenous women are dying significantly more often than their white peers. And so as we get into the later 2010s, I guess I'll say, the CDC developed some tools to bring back MMRCs and also to collect and analyze that data. And so we have things presently like the Maternal Mortality Review Data System or Maternal Mortality Review Information System application, I missed the word there, which help collect the data that maternal mortality reviews are analyzing, and it helps us to make some conclusions and make recommendations for how we can prevent, stop, and hopefully get that rate very close to zero when it comes to maternal mortality. Next slide. And so that brings me to the work that I'm doing today. And I will say that storytelling and MMRCs, this is a new space that we are walking in. I shared that we were incredibly inspired by the work that Rosemary and Dr. Peck are doing with femurs. And so this is a space in which we are continuing to shift, expand, learn, bruise, fall down, but work through. But we are very committed to doing this work. And as I believe Janelle shared earlier, adding that incredibly necessary context to the process so that we can have a full understanding, just the full, breathe the full experience and learning that can happen from the MMRC. And so AMCHIP, in collaboration with fellow partners, helps plan and host an event called the MUM, or the MUM 5, as I will refer to it. And it is really just a convening of MMRC members and staff to network, to learn, to discuss best practices of maternal mortality surveillance and review. And we had a MUM earlier this year in April. And I also want to give thanks to Kenn, to Janelle, to Magda, again, because they presented at this MUM, and it was an amazing experience. I'll talk a little bit more about the findings from that in like 20 seconds, but it is because of their pouring into this space that we were able to kind of start this work. And so next slide. And so this is a graphic recording from the plenary session on storytelling that Magda and Janelle did, where Janelle shared a very similar presentation, a more expanded presentation that she shared with us today about the context around Indigenous women and how that context plays into our thinkings and how we should approach maternal mortality. I mean, I won't go in depth into the image right now, but I encourage you to take a look at it. I can also provide the link so that you can see, look at it even more closely. But it really prompted MMRC members to think about in their process, how are we thinking about and including the full context of a person's life? Next slide, please. And we also wanted to provide people with the opportunity to practice. And so just as we shared our 6-word stories at the top of the call, we encouraged our participants at the MUM to share their 6-word stories. And it was such a transformative moment because people really leaned in to share their stories. There are a number in this recording that really stand out to me, but I'll just give you a second to look over very quickly. There's a lot of things that are compelling us to this work. There are a lot of things that I think we collectively want to do better and want to improve. And I think working together collaboratively to get us, to this better future that we want is something that we're just continuing to do. And next slide. And very lastly, so what is next and what are we doing next? And so we are continuing to think about what is practice, how can we practice, how can we better incorporate storytelling into the MMRC process? And so we're continuing to look at opportunities for members to engage in storytelling. We also want to have more people on the review who have that lived experience, who have those stories. And so I also want to uplift a report that was released earlier this week by Black Mamas Matter Alliance called Maternal Mortality Review Committees, Sharing Power with Communities, which was an incredibly transparent and honest reflection on the experience of community members working on MMRCs and the work that we need to do to have more diverse stories present. We also highlighted some story opportunities. And so there are some podcasts there I won't list, but if you're not familiar, I encourage you to get familiar. They're great places to just learn the robustness of maternal health and maternal stories. And lastly is partnership. We're so happy to be in partnership with my fellow panelists here. And it is through that partnership that I know that we can continue to evolve and develop this work. Next slide. And that is it. Thank you so much. And now I will pass the mic to Dr. Barfield.
Thank you so much. That was wonderful. Let's just take a moment just to reflect on what we've heard so far. So I would like to start the next presentation. Let me know if you can see the screen.
Looks great.
Okay, and can you see my presentation now?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you, everyone. So I'm Dr. Wanda Barfield. I direct CDC's Division of Reproductive Health. And first, I want to just thank Janelle and Alethia for sharing your stories, as well as to Rosemary and Kristina for the important and impactful work that you're doing in data collection and mortality review. Now, Kenn Harris and I would like to talk with you a bit more about the importance of storytelling in advancing maternal and child health. And I'm going to focus here on the power of mother stories, and then Kenn will focus on the power of father stories. So you're familiar with the statistics around maternal mortality, and as public health professionals, we are used to seeing data, but every one of these numbers, every data point is a person, and each person's story and circumstances are different. And the health of a mother and baby are heavily influenced by the factors that surround them. And the circumstances in which we are born, grow, live, work, and play, the social determinants, affect our health and our life. And these include things like policies, laws, housing, transportation, access to food, education, lifestyle, and genetics. And in order to really improve the care and outcomes for mothers and infants, we need to understand the context in which they live in. We really need to hear their stories. So as my colleagues have shared, there are opportunities in mortality review to piece together these stories. And the more data we pull together, the more we can see the full story. Some states, for example, Illinois, are using case examples as part of their maternal mortality review reports to bring the data to life and highlight major themes and factors that need to be addressed in preventing maternal deaths. And it helps us to remember the lives affected behind each data point. The work that's being done to tell the story of the lives lost through infant and maternal mortality review is the key to transforming that data into action and driving the necessary change to improve outcomes. While we're making notable progress in comprehensive and equitable data collection, we still need to create more opportunities for people to share their own stories, and we need to amplify those stories. So in 2018, we decided to see how a communication campaign might raise awareness and help support the work that CDC's Division of Reproductive Health does to address maternal mortality and morbidity. Through conversations with experts in the field, the idea of raising awareness of urgent maternal warning signs and really listening to women and hearing their concerns were the message that seemed to be needed and resonated. In 2020, we launched the Hear Her campaign with support from CDC Foundation and Merck for Mothers. And the goal of the campaign is to raise awareness of potentially life-threatening warning signs during and after pregnancy, and to improve communication between patients and their healthcare providers. The site features a range of information for pregnant people, their support networks, and their healthcare providers. You can simply go to www.cdc.gov/hearher. A key strategy of this campaign is to share personal stories, and the campaign currently features the stories of 6 women who experience serious pregnancy-related complications. And we also promote the stories from people who have reached out to through the campaign team through our Twitter accounts. So I'd like to share these 3 stories in video of the women who shared these experiences. And I'm hoping that the sound works. So let's see. Okay, I'm just going to, for a moment, stop sharing. Wait, it should work. Here.
Being a mother is amazing, and we have this story together. We both survived. And not everyone who faces what I faced gets to say that.
I had constant chest pains. It felt like someone was stabbing at my chest. It felt like I couldn't breathe for about a good 3 to 4 minutes, and it was painful.
I had heard of preeclampsia before, but I had never, experienced it due to the fact that my first pregnancy was so normal. So once I started having the symptoms, it was very, very scary.
I knew with this pregnancy something didn't feel right.
If you know in your gut that something is wrong, something is wrong.
I told my family members, and they were like, it's just pregnancy related. Everyone goes through it. I told my spouse what was going on. He was like, you're exaggerating.
And then when I would voice my concerns. Sometimes it would be, oh, you're pregnant, your feet are supposed to swell, or oh, you're fine, you're pregnant, like that, just it's fine. But I didn't feel fine.
I didn't have what I needed, the tools. I didn't know who to talk to or how to talk or how to speak up for myself. I was scared. I was scared a lot of the time because I just felt like no one heard me.
No one should have to feel that way at all.
I felt like I don't think that this is normal. I don't think that I should be feeling like this. So I went to a different hospital and they found an 11-centimeter abscess on my uterus. They'd never seen this before, and they said that had I not come in, it could have easily been a there's nothing we could do situation. So even if those around you aren't listening, or they're trying to pacify what you're feeling and telling you this is just normal, trust your gut and know that it's not normal if you don't feel it's normal. And tests may come out, to say that it's perfectly fine, but you'd rather err on the safe side and know that you're okay.
It's extremely important to hear women because you don't know what they're feeling, but they do.
My advice to a woman is, you know yourself, you know your body. If it's nothing, then let the doctor tell you that it's nothing, because you'd rather be safe and it be nothing than have not spoken to anybody and it be something very serious and something that is preventable.
I just really want women and their support systems to advocate hard. It could mean your life, it could mean your child's life. There's no little questions when it comes to your health care.
I want to share my story to help other women speak up and be heard. Hear her.
These stories evoke emotion and passion, which we need to drive action. And by sharing these stories, we hope that other mothers don't have to go through what they did. And we need them to be heard, and we need to hear all mothers. So the Hear Her campaign also aims to teach healthcare professionals that serve pregnant and postpartum women, and health professionals play a critical role in eliminating preventable maternal mortality. And one part of the solution is to really hear women's concerns during pregnancy and engage in an open conversation so that they can make sure that these issues are adequately addressed. And over the past year, we've conducted informal interviews with a variety of healthcare professionals to understand the barriers and the opportunities to better communicate with pregnant and postpartum patients. And this is an opportunity for health professionals to be more involved. So within over a year, we've already seen notable change in the reach and impact from this campaign. And we've really had a chance to learn a lot from this. So it sounds like I'm not on presentation. So let me just go back. Let me just go back to my presentation. Can you see the presentation?
We're still on your notes. If you do
Okay.
from
Let me
current
go.
slide, it looks like.
Okay.
There we go.
Okay.
And happy we
Great.
got to see that kiss on the cheek moment.
Okay.
In your smile.
Okay, thanks. So in a year, we've seen some notable reach and impact from the campaign. And since the launch, there's been over 445,000 unique visitors, 671,000 views, 208 million impressions from digital and social media, and we've had over 60 earned media mention. And we're looking at data again, but these numbers also represent people, and the people who we're hearing about and the information is really important to spreading the word. And, we're also seeing that from an internet panel survey that the awareness of the Hear Her's key messages have increased, and we have an opportunity to really learn more about the maternal warning signs and encourage people to seek more information and talk to their healthcare providers. So partners, which include many of you, have really been instrumental in amplifying this campaign, and we certainly could not have the reach that we have without your support. And we've also had a strong interest from state and local health departments that have expressed the need for tools to address maternal mortality in their own communities. And all the states shown here have localized the materials in some way. So we have uploaded many materials to CDC state and county health media center so that health departments can more easily request and co-brand selected materials. And our team produces technical assistance when needed. So as we continue to share more stories and develop resources on how to improve our communication and quality of care, I just want to emphasize how important it is to center our work on the voices of the people that we're aiming to serve. And we need to be mindful of the inequities of so many people that we serve, face, and practice cultural humility and awareness in the care that we provide and how we share our stories. So stories are the catalyst for change and the context of what we do. And I'd like to end by applauding each of you for coming out to the symposium event and for the work that you do to hear mother stories and improve outcomes. And then I'd like to pass things over to Kenn. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Barfield, and I'm excited to continue. And what I would like to do in the essence of time, I am actually going to yield my time so that I can make sure we have time for the wonderful and we have planning for this session. And so thank you again, Dr. Barfield. And I think for me, if there's anything I want to make sure people understand is I think father stories are about mother's stories within MCH. And that's what we talk about in the fatherhood work within MCH. It's really about really recognizing him as part of her support, a partner that she trusts. And many times in situations when he is there and not acknowledged, then her voice is not amplified, because I've been in this situation with my wife losing my second child when my voice was not heard. And many of you know Charles Johnson. That's what happened to him when his wife Kira was in distress. He was telling her story, but no one even listened. So I really want to I'm glad I'm coming behind you, because my emphasis, let's continue to build the Her Story campaign, and father's role in that is to amplify and lift up her story. So I really want to talk about story fortifying. How do we fortify, amplify, lift up those stories as we think about inclusion of fathers and partners with mothers and birthing people? So I'm going to tell a silent story. I'm going to just walk through my slides, and I'll only say something I felt led to say, and I'll get to the last slides just so I can do this in just about 5 minutes. And if you're willing to go with me, this is a time to breathe, take in everything that my colleagues have said so far, and let it all sit so we can end up having some good conversation as we wrap up. So again, story fortifying is father inclusion is what I want to talk about in this moment. So MCH, I'm father within MCH, and hopefully I designed this in case I needed to cut my time short. We have to see him in the MCH space. Where women and children are, we need to put him back. Inclusion is not easy. We have to recognize it was exclusion before, so the journey is tough to move him from exclusion to now inclusion. The goal is to celebrate diversity, not assimilation. As you heard from Janelle's presentation, it's not about assimilating, making the same system for him. We have to accommodate. So father inclusion systems were not designed for him. This was not a system designed for him. So everyone in this space has to pay attention to how your system is designed and functioning to change it. And equity will come up later on about fathers. Look back, leap forward. Applaud HRSA MCH for what it's done in focusing on fatherhood. "100 years of MCH, 30 years, only 30 years of fatherhood. From 1912 to now, there's a story of fatherhood that we have to look back at in order to create a future. Black men, African-American men, there's 400 years of a legacy of stories that have to be heard. And when we think about our Native brothers, there's 500 years of history. And Janelle talked about that, the assault on the women, Native women and children. There was also assault on those men and fathers in those communities. Men were rendered invisible across the timeline. Fatherhood in 20th century is very different from what we're doing now. You're here today because we're doing different things in the 21st century. And calling out an organization like National Healthy Start Association, who's been looking at fatherhood within MCH context for the history of the Healthy Start program for 30 years. Other timelines to look at. Incarceration under all of those administrations under those times. We need inclusion champions. We need to understand what's going on in this country. Our incarceration is out of control. 1 in 3 Black men, 1 in 6 Latino men, compared to 1 in 17 white men are incarcerated. Our fathers, many of them are incarcerated according to NFI. We need policies infused with equity for reentry programs so that these men, when they're out, don't have to live under the brutal shadow of former incarceration. We've done fatherhood in the age of mass incarceration. It is hard. Look at the systems that keep him out and separated from her. Be in the clinic program, right up to societal level that has created barriers. We have to remove those barriers. We need inclusion champions. We need to see him with them, with her and with them. When you look at your continuum, think about paternal involvement, fatherhood. Think about before, during, after, and beyond. We need inclusion champions. We've done the research. We know what it needs. We know how to do this. And when we look at Black fathers, again, doing this in the age of mass incarceration. And my work with my colleagues, our JAMA article was about the system has to change to receive fathers. We have documentation that shows fathers have value in MCH. But we have to address these things. Appreciative of people like Dr. Coles. Black men may be less likely to marry their kid's mother, but typically remain involved in raising their children. So even with yesterday's session here at the conference, we talked about single parenting, single dads, single moms. You're not single if you still have that help, and just acknowledging it is important. So 21st century has to be about lifting up, holding up, and building up fathers. Fathers are another part of the support to our mothers and our babies. They're our mothers, they're our babies, my wife, my son. Honor, respect others that are in the lives of these women and birthing people. When you think about their circle of support, do you know who else supports her as you're serving her? So yeah, hear her. And I love it because this campaign encourages me to think about cognitive empathy, listening with understanding, with intent to understand. And like grandma used to say, you know better. And when you know better, you should do better. But before we can hear him, we have to see him before we can hear him. Her story matters, his story matters, their story matters. Examine the root of father inclusion wherever you are, whatever level you're at, organization, program, system, and you'll see, is there a value for fathers? Is there a belief that he matters? What is your thinking and strategy about including him? And that's what you'll see, the behavior. So we have to look at our value, our beliefs that leads to our thinking, and then our behavior. But fatherhood involvement is really about inclusion, then making those connections and doing the type of engagement that really gives us better outcomes for her, for him, for them. So let's reach for something better. Distill those dominant narratives that Dr. Peck talked about. Let's move from just counting dads to making them count. Remember, the system's not designed for him. System's not accustomed to even serving him. And we also need to work with our dads because they need to understand the system. So what's next? What recommendations do we have? What can we do? Make it real. Make fatherhood part of your system. The Bureau did it. Fatherhood is now a required component of the Healthy Start programs, 101 programs across the country. My God, we're going to have an opportunity to tell stories of 10,000 plus dad stories. And there are other organizations at ACF, Fatherhood Fire. WIC is also looking at father inclusion. The association continues to do its work around father inclusion. HRSA, also its McVie programs are looking at father inclusion. So there are things to look at and learn from. But again, hear her. Let's get behind that fathers are part of this story as well. So fathers were invisible in times past. So the first thing, let's see him with her, with them, with his family. Let story fortify, let's amplify, lift up greater, make more powerful her story, being part of it, because her story expands when fathers and partners are acknowledged and included. Let's create systems that support them in supporting her and supporting them. That's what we need to do. We can do this. So I like to end with hope always. A story should have that hope. We can do this. The end. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you, Kenn, and thank you all of our presenters that have come forth today. We have filled your plate high and too high to spilling off the brim and even going a bit past the top of the hour. But we want to be able to let you know three things and end with a closing story. The first is that stories already are part of your lives, your communities, your work, but we've kept them to the side as being not objective and anecdotal. They are our superpowers if we integrate and weave them with our data to be able to give the context, to talk about the change that needs to happen and to change that narrative. And the second is that you should tap the storytelling vitality that you have in your communities and bring them into the work and become part of theirs. So there's a movement for stories. And third, start with your anchor story, a story of you, a story of a moment that you knew. And then we're going to end with the story from a person who's going to tell us about the moment that she knew in her work in Healthy Start, that her story mattered. So yes, we're going a little over time because stories are a little messy and they take time to breathe, but I want to reintroduce Tamala Milan Alexander to bring us home with a story. And if you can come on board and if you can pin her and listen to her, she has 3 minutes to take you to a moment that she knew that her story mattered. That will end us out, and we thank you for joining us today. Tamala, tell us about your moment.
Thank you so much, Dr. Peck, and all of the fellow panelists. This has been a tremendous part of learning. One of the things I've done over my time in Healthy Start is share my story. And it's been the same, but what I've learned about the moment is to take this gem of a story and share it with you because it would be the catalyst to why I became and remain involved with being a part of the story. Like any time, Healthy Star has always had these very swanky meetings. We go to these wonderful hotels that I could never afford to stay in, and these wonderful lunches, some of the best food you've ever had. You know, the chicken, the not so cooked green beans, not like your grandmother cooks. They're a little green for me. And you're sitting in this room as, you know, the forks that are to your right and these forks to your left. I never understood it because we always had like the one fork and please go find the spoon. But as people are sitting there clinking on the plates, I'm asked to share my story, my Healthy Start story of how I overcame some things. And after I talked about one loss of my children, overcoming drug abuse, and being, you know, empowered through the work of Healthy Start, I'm standing on this stage. My mentor had just given me a scarf because I was literally shivering. And I was caught between anxiety for speaking in front of a group of people and also just being cold. It's Chicago, it's the wintertime. And for some reason, no one thought to turn the heat up just a bit to accommodate the weather conditions. But as I'm standing there at the podium, shaking, and everybody is eating their lunch, and I'm listening to the clink, the clink, the, are they listening? Do they even hear me as they're finishing up their a la chicken and their very, very green beans? And there's an opportunity to share with me and the other panelists at that time. And this long cord, you know, the long cords, they didn't have these, you know, little ones that you just come up and give to somebody. They had the long cord that sort of reached tables. If you tried to get up, you probably would have flipped and fallen. But they had this long speaker cord go over to a woman who was really trying to get the attention of me. And she was sitting at the back of the room. And I'm looking through all the folks, maybe about 75 people are in this room of tables. And as she's reaching high to share, the microphone finally gets to her. The cord reaches her in the back of this room. And what she shares with me is that, and everyone in that room, was that she had heard me before. And I was very new to the Healthy Start speaking realm. I knew I had a story and I shared it, not understanding the impact, not understanding its importance, but just sharing because I knew it was important to me. But what she reflected back at that moment was that because she had heard my story, and at that moment we were looking eye to eye, that she herself was in the middle of trying to get her children returned. And that because she had heard my story of trying to get and achieving success in the return of my children, that it had gave her the resolve. It had gave her the power to fight. As she's in the middle of this journey, there were tears in her eyes. And I can recall those tears. I can recall that feeling of not knowing, scared, and feeling all alone. But what she gave me is what I thought I had gave her. And that was the resolve, the commitment to keep sharing this story. And while I had said this story in so many ways, this time, this part of the story about meeting her in that space, hearing her across this room of people who are clinkety clank and they're eating their lunch, and this woman and I sharing a moment together that would make me feel and understand that it's moments like that that encourage us and empower us to understand how powerful one story can be. And I'm grateful that Dr. Peck was able to give me an anchor story, a story that I've told a million times from beginning to end. But it's important to understand why I continue to share this story, why I continue to want to look across the room and see the eyes that remind me of mine. and to keep going. So thank you. Thank you so much.
Woo! Thank you. Goosebumps. Worth the extra 10 minutes of this session. We all have an extraordinary anchor story that will refresh us for the hard work ahead. We pledge to bring our stories and midwife their stories strategically, not to tell it in the same old ways, but in new ways that will get their brains on fire, that will replace the dominant story, that will bring out our superpowers, which is our stories together. This MCH space is changing, and we're going to make it change together. Thank you, Tamala. Thank you, all of our speakers. Thank you, CityMatch. Thank you, CDC. You want to have more fun like this? Then join us for storytelling office hours to be continued. We'll be sending out information about when that is in the new year. May the storytelling movement for social change begin at this moment forward. Take best care. Have a great rest of the City Match. Please join me in applauding all of the speakers today who've been amazing. And thank you for the extra 12 minutes of your time to allow the story that needed to be told to be heard.